Hello and welcome to Spinning a Yarn Tale, a podcast about fiber arts, traditions, and history, brought to you by You and I Yarns in Chehalis, Washington. My name's Denise.
My name's Blair.
And today we're talking about
Irish lace and Welsh
weaving. Yay! All right. Before we get started, do you want to talk about your progress on your knitting?
Yeah. Why don't we stop and smell the roses a little bit and talk about what we're working on? So, I'm still working on my Bonnie cardigan. I'm getting to the point where I'm going to be starting the ribbing in about 3 or 4 inches. And then I'm going to steek it and do the button band.
Yay! And then it's done.
Well,
you have sleeves.
Yeah, it needs sleeves. It would be a very nice vest.
Oh gosh, the sleeves are always the worst. Do you like sleeves?
Sleeves are actually not that bad for me. Sometimes I knit them 2 at a time. Sometimes I don't.
Yeah, that's kind of smart. You can't really do that when you start in the round, right?
Well, you can always work your sleeves backwards. So from the cuff up.
Yeah, and then attach them.
So instead of when it tells you to start decreasing, you start increasing.
Oh, okay. Cool.
And you take your final stitch count on your sleeves and you start that instead of starting at the beginning.
Yeah, right. That's pretty cool. All right, making progress.
Yeah, what are you working on?
I just cast it on the Bonnie cardigan.
Wow.
Yeah, I got inspired by Blair and I cast it on the same cardigan because I liked the design and the structure. And so this is going to be my first steek.
Yeah, because so I convinced you that steeks were wonderful because I'm knitting mine in the round because I don't like to purl. I wear a larger bust size, so I end up with a lot of stitches. Mm-hmm. And so purling like 400 or 500 stitches sometimes is just like, oh.
Yeah, that's too much.
And so you saw me doing that and you were like, oh, that's a good idea.
Intrigue.
Yeah. So now it's going to be steek time, baby.
I'm going to try and be faster than Blair, of course.
Well, that's not going to be hard. I've been working on this cardigan for like 2 years. Yeah. So.
I want to have it done by springtime so that I can wear like a dress with a cardigan.
That would be really nice.
Yeah, I have this whole idea. But anyway, yes, that's the knitting.
Have you
been doing any spinning?
I have been doing some spinning. I've been working on spinning some fin from a wonderful local farmer and spinning teacher. Her name is Wendy. She so gratefully bequeathed a fleece upon me. And I was like, yes, thank you so much.
Of course.
And it's been wonderful to work with.
Great. Yeah, that's exciting.
I didn't even have to wash it.
Yeah, that's the best part.
It is the best part.
I don't have the patience for that. But maybe come spring when it's sunny, I could maybe do it. Maybe. We'll see. And then, do you know the lambing count for the You and I? Or the
last I checked, it was 18 little lambs. Black Sheep Creamery has officially started lambing season. Yay. And that means, 1, soon we're going to get the beautiful soft cheese that they make when lambing season comes around. Because they make it with the fresh milk. And it's delightful. And also, it means we get to see babies.
Yay! Yes, so go check out the lambing count in the store and maybe pick up some yarn.
You can also pick up some East Frisian wool.
Yes, we have a lot of that.
We do. We have a lot of yarn made with the wool from the sheep. And then we also have beautiful fiber.
Yes, it's very nice.
It is very nice.
Yeah, it's very beautiful. I'm looking at it right now. It's I'm tempted.
We have some beautiful grays and, of course, a delightfully creamy white.
Yeah, very nice.
Yes.
And then you made a collection along the Shayless, or you didn't make the collection?
Oh, I didn't make this, no.
No.
I helped work on the Along the Chehalis collection, which is in the store. So feel free to drop by and check it out.
Yay.
It's locally milled, locally dyed, and locally grown yarn. So check it out. Come in and chat about it.
Mm-hmm. Always worth it.
Always worth it. Should we get started?
Maybe we should.
Alrighty. So, we are going to start with Irish crocheted lace this week.
Mm.
So, Irish crochet lace is, well, lace, and it's crocheted. It's really beautiful and really, really intricate, and it's always done on really, really fine hooks. But before we dive into the nitty-gritty of what Irish crochet lace is and how it came to be, we should kind of get a little bit of a backstory on what crochet is.
Yeah, because we haven't touched on crochet a lot.
No, we haven't.
Yet.
So, like, kind of a quick rundown.
Mm-hmm.
We kind of find the first substantive evidence of crochet as we know it in Europe in the 19th century. So that's the 1800s. But before that, there was plenty of different names for what crochet was. One of them being shepherd's knitting.
Oh.
Yeah, because shepherd's knitting, it was done with one hook. So kind of like a shepherd's crook. You know?
Yeah.
And so it was considered like the shepherd's craft almost. We do have a lot of evidence for a lot of crochet being done, but it's also kind of hard because a lot of early findings of quote-unquote crochet were confused with nail binding.
Oh, yeah.
Which is really similar in construction. Yeah. So it's just kind of there. We have evidence of the earliest books, which were, oh gosh. Okay, never mind. We have the earliest reference to garments being made with crochet in about 1793 to 1830, and those are referenced in a book called Memoirs of a Highland Lady by Elizabeth Grant. And that's not a pattern book by any means. It's just a lady talking about her trip to Scotland. And whoa, they're so different there. Like they weren't in the same continent or something.
Yeah.
But it's a really cool look into what the life was like, because crochet for a long time was kind of kept in Scotland. It was considered a Scottish craft. Mm-hmm. Even though the name as we know it is French. It was considered a shepherd's craft and a poor person's craft, and a lot of people did it because it was easy and it took one hook and you could take it anywhere. You didn't have to lug around, like if you were knitting a sweater, a giant piece of fabric.
But it's interesting because it takes more yarn.
It does take more yarn.
So how can it be a poor people's craft?
Well, these poor people are the ones who are growing the yarn.
Oh, yes. Yeah, okay.
So they spin a lot of it, and it wasn't necessarily used for garments. Mm-hmm. It wasn't necessarily used for garments. It was used for a lot of things. Mm-hmm. Especially like decoration, because crochet also has really strong connections to tambour embroidery, which is a French craft.
Yes.
they're very similar in construction. The only difference is, I think, one crochet doesn't have any fabric attached to it.
Yeah. It's just yarn.
It's just yarn.
Yeah.
Where tambour has cloth that you're working into.
Yeah. Yeah, I've seen that kind of stuff.
Yeah. The first instructions for crochet, so like the first pattern that we could consider it like equivalent to modern day crochet, was actually produced and printed in a Dutch magazine called Penelope.
Penelope?
Yeah.
Never heard of that magazine.
It was back in the 1800s. Oh, I would be surprised if you heard about Penelope. So that's kind of where the first printed pattern came from. And much like knitting, everybody in Europe claims they were the ones who created it.
Yes.
And there's still no, like, concrete evidence of where it actually came from. So it kind of is everybody's craft.
So what we know is it's been around for a long time, but then the term crochet only started appearing in the 1900s, you said?
The 19th century. So crochet got its name coined in the 19th century by a series of books, even though the first pattern was printed before that in a magazine called Penelope.
Yeah.
Before that, crochet was often referred to as shepherd's knitting.
Okay. Yeah.
And that's kind of what we're going by.
Cool.
There's a lot of crochet evidence hanging around, but it's also really hard to tell if it was null binding or if it was crochet.
Yeah. Yeah. Makes sense.
So it's old.
It's old.
It's old.
It's old, all right.
Probably just as old as knitting. We just don't know where we can't really pinpoint where it came from like we could with knitting. But now that we've covered that, why don't we jump into crocheted lace?
Yes.
So Irish crocheted lace was kind of introduced into Ireland as a form of famine relief for the impoverished families that lived there. It swept through the country in the mid to late 1840s. Some people say it was thanks to one specific person. Some people say it was thanks to like the crochet movement that came in there. Because Mademoiselle Riego, I can't say if it's...
Blanchardière.
Yeah. You said it. Who printed...
Difficult name.
Yeah, who printed an instruction booklet on how to crochet lace. Because she wanted to make a book to kind of show the versatile nature of the craft. And it was a great introduction for them because a lot of people picked up making this lace because it really imitated bobbin lace and embroidered lace at the time, which took a lot of time to make. Whereas crochet, you could make something in 25 hours. Still a long time. But it wasn't 600 hours of embroidering lace. So, the book she published, going back to Mademoiselle Riego, it was called Knitting, Crochet, and Netting, The 12 Illustrations, and it was published in 1846. And like I said, it was cheap and accessible for families to make money. And that's what they did. They would, entire households, because the famine, which is the potato famine, destroyed a lot of rural farming communities. Just absolutely wiped them out. People were leaving left, right, and center to like America. And the people who were staying were living in horrible poverty, not being able to afford to feed their families. And when they saw this, they said, oh, wow, we could market this and sell this. Yeah. And this would be an easy way for us to make money. And that's what they did. And from this, a whole movement began as a form of, like I said, famine relief, where schools were made to teach people how to make this lace. Children, men, women, whole families were making lace.
Yeah, this reminds me of a different, country or tradition that we're going to talk about later in a few episodes. But yeah, where poverty kind of makes knitting and crochet necessary.
Yeah. As a way to live.
Yeah.
Even though in this time, knitting machines are huge. People are no longer knitting for money. You could still crochet for money. Because you could make beautiful swaths of lace. And this lace was used for almost anything. It was used for doilies. It was used for curtains. It was used for embellishments on dresses. But it was considered the cheaper product, even though people put a lot of hard time and money into it.
As opposed to knit lace.
Not even knit lace. It was more like bobbin lace. Bobbin lace and embroidered lace. And bobbin lace is where you kind of take a set of bobbins. The number of bobbins depends on how complicated your design is. And you kind of make intricate braids with them and connect them in different ways to make lace motifs.
I think there's a Dutch expression about that specific kind of lace that's kind of degrading towards the people who did that.
Oh, Irish lace?
No, the bobbin lace. Yeah, that's interesting. Now that you're saying that, I'm like, oh, yeah. Well.
What's the saying?
It's just that, if that people who do bobbin lace are like useless, basically. If I can loosely translate it.
Well, that is a good idea. It was a lot of mid to upper class ladies who made bobbin lace.
Yeah.
So it was their way of bringing in some money. And it was a good way to do it. Just like how crocheted lace was a great way for Irish families to bring in money. And so these families would take up crocheting lace, and it became kind of competitive. People would hide their lace patterns and get really protective over it because it's their way of making money and living, right? So, like, these people, there was a saying where if somebody knocked on your door, you'd better hide all your lace. So everybody would hide anything that had, like, their signature lace pattern on it away from guests so that they wouldn't be able to, like, kind of piece together what their signature, whatever is, their motif. And so it was, like, really, really secretive. It was not a welcoming environment. It was very competitive.
Yeah, that's not a uniting crochet community.
No, it was not everybody gets into a circle and they talk about like their family. It was nobody touch me. I am working on my lace and you better not tell your friends how we do this, little Timmy.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So
that's real famine.
It was
real poverty.
It was real hardship. And like it's so interesting because this lace became wildly popular because it was cheaper than buying bobbin lace. Yeah. It was cheaper than buying embroidered lace, and it was just cheaper, but it looked like them. It imitated the style really, really well. But those with a discerning eye, the upper class, would put up their noses at you if they saw that you were using Irish lace. And there's also a saying, which is kind of funny because these families became pretty well off from making Irish lace. And in Ireland, there was lace families, Irish lace families, and then there was like the shanty families.
Yeah.
And basically that meant everybody who made lace was living well off while the rest of us are not. And when they came to America, it kind of became like something to make fun of them about.
Yeah.
So the same Irish lace families were being called Irish lace families as a derogative term.
Instead of,
Like, oh, you're rich. It was like, oh, you have weird, cheap curtains.
Yeah.
So it was like the Irish lace curtains.
How embarrassing.
Yeah. So they would call them, they would say, oh, don't bring your Irish lace curtains here. Things like that. And it was just like, yeah, kind of crazy. But eventually, like most things, the need for handmade lace died out. Handmade lace was something that was replaced with machine lace.
Yeah.
And so the Irish crocheted lace community died out as a response as well, which is kind of sad. People still make it, and we still have books for it, and it's really beautiful, but it wasn't a way to make money anymore. It was more like, oh, I made this beautiful piece of lace, or I did this as a hobby.
Yeah, it's another hobby thing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so it kind of just went the way of the wind.
Yeah. Like
it was a short-lived about like 50 years.
And very necessary.
But it was very necessary in that time. But it's kind of cool. And if you have a chance, looking up Irish lace on the Smithsonian Museum website, it's really, really pretty. And very, very intricate.
And was it mostly wool that they made it with?
Yeah, they made it with wool. That's what they had.
Yeah, exactly.
It was usually really finely spun wool. Mm-hmm. It was usually done on, if I had to say, probably 0.5 millimeter hooks.
Yeah, very tiny.
Very tiny. The hooks you see people making earrings with these days, you know?
Yeah.
But if you would think it would take you forever, but if you have an entire family working on it, and also it's all you do for 12 to 16 hours a day, you can get it done, you know. Oh, moving on. We should move on to our next topic, because we've kind of exhausted what my knowledge base is on Irish lace. And that would be Welsh blankets. Also known as tapestry blankets.
I love tapestry.
Tapestry weaving?
It's actually, since the last 2 weeks, I got into it. And now I want to do it.
Because I've been researching it and you've been reading my notes.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Getting me motivated.
But to start with things, we should preface this with spinning and weaving is really ingrained in Welsh culture. They have a lot of sheep there. The culture around shepherding is huge. It still is. A lot of people have a lot of sheep still. Most Welsh homes had at least one spinning wheel or loom. And that's because this country has the largest amount of sheep to people per capita, which is crazy. Sheep are really, really instrumental to their culture. Evidence of spinning and weaving in Wales we've found prehistoric evidence. Like, there is no specific date that we can say, oh, well, they started weaving in the 1700s. It's been around forever there. Mm-hmm. They had weighted warp looms, and then they moved to, when looms as we know them came to be, they moved to those. But you could just find the rocks and stuff like that would weight the warp. And we have a lot of evidence based around that, as well as whorls for spindles, carved out of rock as well. We also have evidence of scraps of fabric that date back a long time. They had bone needles they found for sewing things together, or finishing the end of your blanket, doing your, what's the stitch called? I don't know.
I know, but I forgot.
I'm so sorry.
I do it all the time. Yeah, sorry.
Not to put you on the spot.
Like an edge stitch.
An edge stitch for when you finish your weaving.
Yeah.
But the biggest thing back then was that sheep weren't actually kept for their fiber. They were kept for their meat and dairy. And as a result, they had the fiber. Sheep were the easiest to keep alive in Wales. It was easier to graze a sheep because they were more acclimated to the mountains and the hills and the rocks than, say, a cow would be. So it kind of just became a thing that if you wanted meat and cheese, you kind of had to have sheep, which is kind of fun. But this also started the Wales has a ton of sheep stereotype, and that everybody in Wales owns a sheep, even though that's not very true. At least not anymore.
Everybody and their mother?
Everybody and their mother.
Exactly.
And there are tons of sheep that are native to Wales, that they came from there. Like the badger-faced Welsh sheep, the Balwyn Welsh mountain sheep, the Beulah speckled face, the black Welsh mountain sheep or Welsh black, the Brecknock hill cheviot, Kerry Hill. I can't say that because it's in Welsh. Lane, and then Welsh mountain again. So there's like all of these sheep, and a lot of them are good for dairy purposes, mostly dairy and meat. But some of them do have beautiful, beautiful multi-purpose fleeces, which is what you kind of were looking for back in the day. And just to bring it up another bragging right, Wales has the Welsh mountain sheep breeds, and those breeds of sheep are some of the oldest in the world, really? Still alive and doing well.
Nice.
But to get into what kind of things people were weaving, the thing that's most known in Wales, their most famous piece, is their blankets. And they're called Welsh blankets or tapestry blankets. And they're kind of double woven. And you know more about that.
A little bit.
So...
yeah, they use, so you have the warp. The warp of a loom is the threads that you warp up, and then the weft will be what you're weaving into the warp.
The warp is up and down, weft is side to side.
It's sideways, yeah, exactly. And weft actually comes from being woven. That's why it's called weft. Yeah, just a little side note. But, so with double cloth, if I understand it correctly, you have 2 layers of weft most often. Sometimes there's 2 layers of warp, but it's most often 2 layers of weft that make for a 2-layered piece. And that's also why it's called tapestry weaving, probably, or tapestry blankets, is because in tapestry weaving you weave in such a way that the warp is going to be entirely covered on both sides by the weft. So same principle.
I didn't know that. That's really interesting.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that's what tapestry weaving meant.
Yeah, I didn't know that either. I just got into it and I kind of read up about it, and because you have weft-led weaving, which is basically tapestry weaving, because you use different ways to weave in the weft that will, within a few rows, you'll not see the warp anymore, because every little weft yarn covers part of the warp. So that's kind of how you weave it in.
Gotcha. That's really interesting.
Yeah.
So these blankets, where they're double woven, were found way back. They were around for a long time because they, 1, were great for keeping the cold out, and 2, they were just a good way to use up wool.
Yeah.
They had a lot of it, and most people would weave their blankets for their own house. So if everybody got a blanket and you had multiple blankets and they were great to give as gifts, etc., etc., etc. Traditionally, they were woven on the weighted weft, the weighted warp looms, not weft.
Yeah.
But they only really took off in about the 1930s when machine weaving became a big deal. Because it was so much easier to set up a weft or a warp on a machine and then just set it to repeat a pattern.
Yeah.
Because they would read like these punch cards and that's how you would weave.
Yeah.
And these blankets are traditionally woven with a repeating pattern. The earliest samples we've found are in black and white because those are the easiest.
Natural colors. Yeah.
Yes. But by the time the 1930s rolled around, it was much more in fashion to weave with bright colors. So you would get these really intricately woven blankets, and they would be in bright, beautiful colors and plaids. The traditional pattern that we know of on a Welsh blanket is called a Carnarvon design, or it's a portcullis, which is what the grates looked like on like castle gates. Mm-hmm. So when you think of like, oh, in medieval times, lower the gate, and it's got all those like holes in it, that's what a portcullis is. And they would have these like grate and like X's pattern all over the blanket.
And it probably worked really well with the double weaving, because then it would just be the opposite color on the other side.
Exactly. These were reversible blankets, which people loved.
Yeah.
And each mill, because mills were a big thing in Wales, almost every village had a wool mill, and that was a place where they would wash and process the fleeces and then weave it. Each mill would have a slightly different design, something that made it unique. So it was a way that they could market themselves. And these places didn't only make these traditional blankets, they also made plaid and exported a lot of plaid. And so they're all kind of a little bit unique. And I think that's really neat.
Yeah. Well, and there were a lot of mills, and now these days we went down to like a handful of mills. I read.
Yeah, yeah.
Which is sad, and they have like a hard time staying open.
Because they're considered a specialty product now and not much of a household product. Yeah. Because they're still using the same techniques and machinery that they would use to weave these blankets as they did 100 years ago.
Yeah, that's pretty unique.
It is. And so, like, they have these blankets, and though it may not be the most efficient way by today's standards, it is accurate to how they should be made.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important to keep around. So I think the biggest thing for both of these topics today is to support your local businesses.
Yeah.
It keeps the doors open, and it keeps tradition alive. We do have books down here at UNI on Irish lace that you can pick up and order and things like that if you're interested. And there is a lot of tapestry weaving books down here if you want to look at that too. But also give a check out to some of the weaving mills in Wales. Check out what they have and what they offer and what the blankets look like, because they are very, very, very cool.
Go to Wales.
Go to Wales. Yeah, support the economy.
Yeah, there's a cool wool museum there too, with some looms and like how they would process the fiber and all that. So
that's really cool.
Yeah,
I need to go to Wales.
Highly recommend. Yeah.
That's another thing I have to stick my fingers into. I have to make a list of wool museums all over the world and then go to every single one.
We'll do a spinning a yarn steel tour.
On location tour.
Yeah. Sounds good.
Where we just go in there and we talk about everything like we know everything.
Yeah.
And when they try to correct us, we go, no,
it's on the podcast.
I'm the expert. I'm the podcaster. So, but I think it would be something fun to do, because you hear a lot about like wool mills in like Shetland, but you don't ever think about places like Wales where wool mills were basically the entire economy.
Yeah, yeah.
People lived off that.
Well, and it was perfect country for it because they had so many rivers that the water could, like rivers and hills, so that the water could power the mills.
Yeah, run the water wheels and things like that they would need.
Yeah.
It's just cool to think about and cool to learn about. So hopefully.
Explore. Yeah.
Hopefully you take a look at these websites that we're going to have linked in the show notes. Be sure to check out any of the books. And if you have any questions, feel free to get in touch with us.
Yeah.
Via our Instagram or maybe our email.
Mm-hmm. And then next time we'll be back with France.
We're going to be talking about France.
France and a little bit of Spain. We want to go over Spain, but there's more in France. Yeah.
Yes. All right. Well, I think that's it for everything this week. Mm-hmm. This has been Spinning a Yarn's Tale, a fiber arts and history and culture podcast brought to you by U&I Yarns in Chehalis, Washington. My name's Blair.
My name's Denise.
And we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Bye.